My name is Patrick Tehan, and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. And my last staff position, I was a newspaper photographer for 40 years, was at the San Jose Mercury News for 24 years. Prior to that, it was the Bremerton Sun in Bremerton, Washington for a year and a half. And then 2 years at the Pittsburgh Press, which folded, which is why I ended up going to Bremerton. And then before that was the Orange County Register in Southern California for 9 years. And then my first job was 2 years at a little newspaper in suburbs of Dayton, Ohio. The first time I really discovered photography, I mean, I had a camera. I was drafted and was in the army in Germany for 2 years, and you could buy cameras very cheap. There was no tariffs or taxes or anything. So I bought a Pentax and just used it for travel photography, but I really didn't do much with it. And then when I got out, I went to Wright State in Dayton for a year and didn't care for it. And still didn't know what I wanted to do for a living. And I'd heard that Ohio University in Athens was rated the #1 party school in the country according to Playboy magazine. So I thought, well, I'll transfer down there and, at least I'll have a good time. And then I ended up in a class with this guy who he needed a housemate. And I moved in with him, and he was a photo major. And he had a darkroom set up in the upstairs bathroom. He said, you should take a beginning photo class and you can use the darkroom. So I take a class, take more classes, and I start going through the fine arts program. And I'm learning from Arnold Gasson, who was a protege or, well, probably a student of Ansel Adams. And so we were doing things like mixing our own developers and doing parametrics and all this stuff. And I realized that, I wasn't going to be Ansel Adams and I need to make a living. And so I started looking into the photojournalism program there. And amazingly enough, it was one of the top two schools in the country for that. OU and Missouri at that time were the two best schools. And I was taking classes with people that went on to work for National Geographic and other places and had great teachers, Terry Eiler, Chuck Scott. And I just stumbled into it. And then built up my portfolio and was able to get a job, at this little paper outside Dayton, and I just kind of took off from there. So as far as photojournalism and the journey, I mean, obviously I was working with and learning from really good people. I worked for the OU Post, which was the newspaper, and it was kind of a crazy place. It was almost like Animal House. It was just independent. It wasn't like a part of the university. You actually got a little salary. Um, and it was just like, like kids trying to put on a play kind of thing. It was just like they're putting out this paper every day and staying up all night, pasting it up, with glue and stuff. The pages that would be, printed. And then, I just I did an internship at the Columbus Citizen Journal, which was a horrible paper, and I learned what not to do. They're having me set up pictures and stuff, which I learned what you weren't supposed to do. But they would just go, tell you to go. They repealed the helmet law for motorcycles, and they wanted me to go out and get a picture of a guy throwing his helmet into a trash can. And I'm like, well, how am I going to do that? They finally sent somebody, the editor's brother-in-law, and I took this picture that I knew was wrong, but it was my first job. Anyway, that's probably too much. But the KO Times was wonderful. It was a two-person staff. It had incredible reproduction. They did a picture page a week, which we produced, ourselves. And everybody was really young. You didn't make any money. But they had two lights enlargers for some reason in the darkroom, which were like the premier enlargers back then. And it came out twice a week. I think it was Wednesdays and Saturdays. So we would shoot high school football every Friday night or basketball. and that would go in the next day's paper. And then we would go out and find these picture pages, and I would work with reporters, and sometimes it was just photos, but I learned to lay out picture pages because I had subscribed to the Columbia Missourian, I think it was, who had Bill Maher was there and Nick Kelch, a couple of guys that went on to National Geographic, and they were doing these incredible layouts. So I would copy these layouts as I was doing these picture pages so they wouldn't look crappy. And it was just a wonderful learning experience. Starting out in photojournalism right now, I think it's really hard. I mean, back when I was doing it, there was a ladder. I started out this little paper and went to bigger papers, and now newspapers have been kind of decimated, and so it's harder to um, get a job, a salary job, like you used to be able to do. And so now a lot of it is freelance. But there are people that are doing it, and they're still teaching it at schools, and it's just you may have to go into a certain thing. You may end up doing commercial work, which pays really well. You may end up doing weddings. You may end up doing freelance for magazines. New York Times still pays people to do stories and do pictures. There's a couple of photographers in Ohio that pretty much just work for the New York Times for the most part. So there is a path, but it's not what it was when I was coming up, unfortunately. The thing I most enjoy about photojournalism, and it's what I tell people, is that nobody sees more than a photojournalist. And this close second would be a reporter, but a reporter can get it over the phone. The photographer has to be there. And so something as simple as I've going to someone's house. I've been in everything from, a hut in Hanoi and a hovel in Tijuana to a billionaire's home with an indoor hockey rink, a basketball court, and everything in between. You go into good neighborhoods, you go into bad neighborhoods, uh, and you just see how people live. Now that seems sort of, silly, but I find it sort of fascinating because I mean, in some ways, most of that experience is sort of shallow, but it's very wide. And occasionally you get deep into things. I've done long-term stories on people with challenges, and that's when you get into the deep stuff. But just in terms of just the variety, I mean, I've shot for a newspaper photographer, I've shot fashion, I've shot food, news, all kinds of sports. Um, documentary work. There's just you always have to do all kinds of different things, and so you learn on the job pretty much. I think the characteristics for photojournalists would be curiosity um, and ability to adapt, and having a good eye. I mean, I've been around really good photographers, exceptional photographers, and I've been around photographers that probably should have been doing something else. They maybe got a job back then because sort of talk my age, but if you could, if you knew how to expose film and develop it, they'd just give you a job and say, "Here's a camera, go." They didn't really care if you took well, they figured, you could just go take pictures. That's kind of how it was back then. So there were people that, they just learned how to do the technical part of it. And now the technical part, of course, is so much easier. So you have to have a good eye. And it's hard to know if you've got that until you just start taking pictures and having someone look at your pictures. You have to have an open, curious mind. You have to master your equipment. Even though it is easier than it used to be, it's still a skill. I mean, you have to be able to expose. pictures correctly and compose. And the other thing is you have to develop your eye. You have to be able to take a photo that doesn't look like grandma shot it with her iPhone, because anybody can just do that now. And you see that at concerts, you see it everywhere. Everybody's got a phone, whereas I remember I was usually the only photographer in a crowd, and now everybody's taking pictures. But you have to be able to take pictures that someone's going to look at more than once, and that is a skill that you develop. You can take classes, you can go to school. My favorite thing to do, and this is very analog, when I would move to a new city, I would go to the local library and I'd say, where are the photo books? And I would go to that third floor and there'd just be these dusty books that nobody looked at. And I would just go through photo books. I still buy photo books. Now that's maybe I'm old, but I think it's a very relaxing way. You can kind of think of it as like, listening to an LP versus, iTunes or whatever. And so if you, and if you don't want to do that, just go online and look at, there's all kinds of websites where you can just look at photography and try to like go ahead and imitate, you know, the photographers, because just everybody's imitated. I mean, Van Gogh imitated somebody, but at some point you will find your own voice. But learn how to compose, learn how to make a good photo, and I think one great way of doing that is looking at really good photos. For ethical reasons, probably a few times. I can't think of anything specific over time, but mostly if somebody didn't want their picture taken and it was uh, especially if they were on their own property, I mean, legally you can take anyone's picture outside, but there's also a morality to that, whether or not you want to like. There's no expectation of privacy when you're outside, but at the same time, you don't want to be a jerk about it. So if somebody says, "I don't want my picture taken," I try to honor that, unless it's some sort of news scene and you can get in all kinds of different scenarios. But yeah. I think that the news media and photojournalism have evolved into not long form anymore. It's more quick hits that you see on social media and on newspaper websites. I don't think people have the attention span that they used to have for documentary work, which I used to do, and it's and that's hard work to do. And I think that's one of the evolutions, and also just in terms of making a living, it's gotten harder. I mean, it's people don't want to pay for content. That's been going on for a while. Newspapers used to have, fabulous amounts of money, and they would just send you to crazy places for in a plane, and now that's all pretty much gone. With the exception of some of the bigger papers like the New York Times or LA Times. But even they have gotten hit. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but there are still places where you can see good photojournalism and websites. Not sure I have a favorite. I mean, I think if I was going to just take one fixed lens, it'd be a 35 millimeter. I have a Fujifilm older digital camera that I always keep in the car, and it's a great street camera. It's a great travel camera. It's light, and it just has a fixed lens. I believe it's like a 35 equivalent. That kind of gives you, a nice, medium range kind of thing. As far as if I'm working, I 24 to 70, something like that, which is a real nice lens, or 24 to 105 is good also. I think it's good numbers. It's been a while since I've taken pictures, but Oh, a lot of stuff. I mean, the trunk was, there was a bag and then there was a trunk, and you'd have all kinds of stuff in the trunk. But I would have, was it 16 to 35, 2470. I'd have a longer telephoto, a 300-2.8 maybe. Sometimes we were issued those. If I was shooting sports, I'd have a 400-2.8 and a 70 to 200, which is a really nice sort of telephoto. I'd have at least two camera bodies, maybe three. If I was shooting sports, I might have three or four. The sports that would give you a camera that was fast, it was very expensive, but had, a high frame rate, or, just a really good, fast, very good quality camera. So some of the stuff was pool, but and then flashes, a number of different on-camera flashes, and then if I was doing a fashion shoot or portrait session, I would have umbrellas, stands, other kind of lighting kits, different brands. So you kind of had to know like a lot of different how to do a lot of different things. As far as JPEG and RAW, I shoot RAW for personal work, and I always have had personal work. Not uh, not that many photographers or photojournalists I know would do personal work. They just do their job and move on. But I came up from that art background at High University, and I've kind of always loved that type of photography. And so I would just do that, and in addition to whatever else I had going on. Sometimes it would be at the same time, like I would be assigned to go photograph a parade, and I started going at 2 hours beforehand and just shooting personal pictures of people getting ready, which I thought was interesting. And for that, I would use RAW because RAW gives you so much more shadow detail and highlight detail, and it's just a bigger file. But if you're shooting, for the paper, they don't need that, and then it just jams up your hard drive. And so you have to kind of think, okay, what's it going to be for? And if it's something that I really want to have every bit of detail, I use RAW.